panel of folks that will be offering some really wise words to you all, but we want to start off with the co-hosts. We have 3 foundations co-hosting this panel today and want to give them an opportunity to talk a little bit about their commitment to equity and in their foundations. We're going to start off with Kimberly Spring from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and then we're going to have Kimberly pass the mic to Subarna Mathis at the Ford Foundation, and then we'll have Subarna pass the mic to Alonzo Plow from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And so without any further ado, Kimberly, please take it away.
Apologies, just realized that I was on mute. I'm sorry about that. So thank you, Elizabeth. I'm really pleased to be a co-host for this webinar and to welcome all of you. My name is, as Elizabeth said, Kimberly Spring. I'm the Director for Research and Evaluation at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. So we at the Casey Foundation are committed to the goal of investing in evaluations that are in service of equity. It's a journey that we've been on for several years now, and it was initially focused with our intentional efforts to increase the diversity of evaluators, and particularly evaluators of color that we partner with. And then that also led us to think not just of how to support and build the network of evaluators of color, but also how we in philanthropy can change our practices and build our own capacity. It has been rewarding to see the work of expanding the bench grow and the ways in which multiple funders from across the country have stepped forward to support this work. As a field, we really are growing and stretching. And then for us at Casey, being intentional and reflexive in how we select the evaluators that we work with is just one way that we think about how to embed equity in our practice. And still, we find that there are ripple effects from the decisions that we make in who we partner with. As we strengthen our relationships with evaluators of color and evaluators who are committed to culturally responsive evaluation, they are helping us to stretch our thinking, to achieve greater awareness of our own biases, and strengthen the quality and the validity of the evaluations that we invest in. So it really is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today and with my philanthropic colleagues and with all of you who are also on a similar kind of journey. We may be all on our own paths and we all have our own particular contributions to make, but it is the collective effort that will bring about the change that we are looking for. So thank you, and I will now pass it on to Subarna.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. My name is Subarna Mathis. I am the, can everyone hear me? I think so, yeah, I'm getting it, that's great. I am Subarna Mathis, and I am a Senior Strategy and Evaluation Officer at the Ford Foundation. Really excited to be here with you all, really excited to see the number of you who are interested as we are in expanding the bench specifically and broadly working on issues of equity related to evaluation. Really quickly, what brought us to both the support to ETB and really caring about pipeline issues in evaluation are, you know, in some ways built right into the mission of the Ford Foundation for some time now, since 2013. Very specifically, the Ford Foundation's mission has been to, on the issues that we work on, look at the root causes of inequality. At a fundamental level, this is, as you all know, about addressing power. And so we see a really direct line between focusing on inequality, power imbalances in our programmatic work, and those same issues, inequality and power imbalances, when we consider the to what end of evaluation, what purpose do evaluations serve, who gets to design them, what kinds of questions are prioritized as a result, how evaluations get implemented. So really put another way, we are seeking to be very intentional about the, like I said, the to what end, the for whom and by whom of evaluations. Just really quickly what this looks like in practice, it looks in practice like all the things that you might think of. So on a very micro level, it's process pieces like not fully baking the evaluation questions before we commission RFPs. It's making sure that we both work with grantees and our external evaluation partners in a way that is us being open and to receiving honest and critical feedback. And very specifically, it's relational, as Kimberly mentioned. It's about not always going with our usual suspects of evaluation partners, but really wanting to get a full spectrum and particularly a diverse spectrum of consultants, where ETB then becomes incredibly important. I'm going to stop there and really looking forward to the discussion and pass it off to Alonso.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good day to everybody. I'm Alonso Plow. I'm Chief Science Officer and Vice President for Research, Evaluation, and Learning at Robert Johnson Foundation. Again, very happy to be a co-host of this Expanding the Bench discussion. Certainly throughout the Foundation's history, but particularly since we've been organized in the last 7 years around building a culture of health and health equity, issues of equity, racial justice, understanding the implications of structural racism in a variety of systems and services and capacities that influence health are critical to what we do as a foundation. And as all of our other partners on the call here, building the right kind of evidence around our journey to have impactful programming around these complicated equity issues requires evaluation strategies that are sufficiently nuanced to those kinds of problems. And we, like you, have been on that journey and manifested in many different ways, from the composition and makeup of our own large evaluation staff internally, the kinds of partners that we try to pursue to do evaluations with. And like I think you'll hear a lot to say, and Bauer's on the call from the Equitable Evaluation Framework Group we work very closely with, Haidar. You know, we are really challenging some of the traditional canons that many of us were trained in around doing a more community embedded, community engaged, and community dynamic form of evaluation. And this is just another form of rigor that is appropriate to the community context. The power imbalances, the equity goals that we have require us to both stretch who we're working with and the constructs that we work with. And just for where we are right now as a health foundation pursuing health through these issues of structural racism, racial equity, power imbalances, community power, it's incredibly important for us to be able to work with evaluators and partners who really understand, have shared life experiences with the diversity of the communities that we are working with. So we're really happy to be on this call today, to be a co-host and learning from all of us in philanthropy about how we better align the folks who do the evaluation and the approaches to evaluation around these improving equity outcomes. But with that, do I turn it back to you, Elizabeth?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you to Kimberly and Sabarna and to Alonso for your remarks and for co-hosting this really wonderful conversation with everybody. So thank you again for all that you did to make this happen and for your commitment to equity. Rochelle Espiritu, a co-director of Expanding the Bench, and I are also founding partners at Change Matrix. And Change Matrix is the entity that assumed management and leadership of Expanding the Bench in 2018. And in 2018, when we assumed management and leadership of Expanding the Bench, the world looked different. We were not in the middle of a global pandemic that highlighted the inequity even more than we knew in health and in social justice. We were not reeling from conversations, maybe we should have been, but we weren't, reeling from conversations about racial injustice the way that we are now. And certainly we weren't as aware, well, maybe some of us were a little aware of how divided we were as a country. And certainly the election of 2020 showed us that yet again. And so there's never a better time, it seems like, than right now to talk about Expanding the Bench, because equity does seem to be on the minds and hearts and on the lips of people all over the country. And so this is a really profound time to be able to share what Expanding the Bench is about and where we hope to go in the next year. And so with that, we'll go ahead and we're going to show a few slides. We didn't let anybody else do slides, but we're going to do a few slides so that you all know a little bit more about Expanding the Bench. So the first thing that you'll see is our problem statement. So what are we trying to address here with Expanding the Bench? And folks have alluded to this in their opening remarks, but Casey, when they first started Expanding the Bench, recognized that the evaluation field just didn't include all the voices it needed to. The voices in particular of diverse communities where there was a history of oppression and exclusion were not represented in the evaluation field. We also, Casey and then us, recognized that there was a practice that was developing around culturally responsive and equitable evaluation that is in need of support and promotion across the evaluation ecosystem. And without it, there's a real potential for harm to individuals, harm to communities, harm to all of us. And we've certainly seen that over and over again as well. So I'll turn it over to Rochelle to talk a little bit about the vision and mission of Expanding the Bench.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And so with that, what we've worked on is a vision for Expanding the Bench and for the field, really. And this was alluded to earlier in Alonzo's remarks around power. And so what we are hoping to see with Expanding the Bench's work too is that power is distributed and that it's distributed equitably. And knowing that that means that there are going to have to be shifts in who traditionally holds the power to those who traditionally do not. And we envision that as all leading towards change, towards justice. And so part of the ways that we imagine doing that for Expanding the Bench is to support diverse evaluators, the folks that aren't typically engaged in this work, and with funders of evaluation to really value, to practice, to promote what we see as this culturally responsive and equitable evaluation ecosystem. And a little bit later, we will talk about how we came to a definition of what Cree is.
So you've heard a little bit about the why. Why do we do this? There are not diverse voices at the evaluation table. The practice of Cree needs some support and promotion, and without it, there's a risk of harm. So that's the why. And you've heard a little bit about our vision, where we hope to go, and what we think our work is. And we want to dive into what we think our work is a little bit right here. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of Expanding the Bench as a whole. And there are three component parts to that. It's the people, it's the practice, and it's the field. So when we talk about the people, we're talking about increasing the numbers and access to people from racially and ethnically diverse backgrounds. That's what we're talking about with the people. And so you'll see in our activities when Rochelle describes them, that we're really promoting pathways and access through databases and ways in which, I think as Sabarna talked about earlier, we can get beyond what we know and really challenge ourselves to move beyond what's easy and routine to what's new and has possibility and can lead to a more equitable result. So there's the people piece of this, and then there's the practice piece of this. And we hope that the practice of culturally responsive and equitable evaluation will become the norm, will become just, this is rigorous evaluation, this is the norm, this is what we assume is best practice, this is what we seek, and this is what we promote. And in a little while, you'll hear a little bit more about how we define culturally responsive and equitable evaluation. But much of our work is about defining, promoting, developing, and enhancing that practice across the entire ecosystem. And then we also believe, if we do all this work with the people, and we do a lot of work with the practice, but there isn't a field that's ready for it, it doesn't matter. And so the field part of the work is how do we support a field that will look for it, that will seek it, that will ultimately demand a Cree practice so that we can achieve the vision that Rochelle talked about earlier. And we do this in very specific ways. So Rochelle's going to talk a little bit about some of the specific activities.
Thanks, Liz. So the first one I'll explain is our Pathways program. And this is going towards what Liz described as the people. And so as we first started off with expanding the bench, we actually had served as the evaluator previously for our Leaders in Equitable Evaluation and Diversity program. And this is a really neat opportunity to engage racially and ethnically diverse researchers or folks with beginning knowledge of evaluation to really deepen their knowledge, their skills, and their competencies in culturally responsive and equitable evaluation. And so each year we take 15 scholars and provide them with 3 things. One is first an online curricula that is focused on culturally responsive and equitable evaluation, and we offer that now through American University. We assign each scholar a mentor in the field, and this has come to known as the secret sauce of the program. Evaluators who are in the program, as well as the mentors and the practicum sites, say that the matches are just amazing. And so we really value that relationship that has been built between scholars and seasoned evaluators in the field. And then third, scholars have the opportunity to take what they've learned, both from their curricula experience and from their mentors, and use that in an evaluation project with a firm or a university or even a foundation where they can become part of a team that is working on an evaluation and bring the lens of culturally responsive and equitable evaluation into the work and the approach. To date, we have graduated now, we're now at 50, I think, because we were at 35 and we just graduated another 15 folks. And so we look forward to starting our next cohort next year. And this program is free to the scholars because of the support that we get from foundations. Next, I'll go over to growing and supporting a network of diverse evaluators practicing Cree. And this is our ACE, or Advancing Culturally Responsive and Equitable Evaluation Network. This network is comprised of evaluators from different racial and ethnic backgrounds who bring strong evaluation expertise as well as work in Cree. And this network largely grew out of the fact, as Liz mentioned earlier, that there has been a tendency in philanthropy to go and contract with evaluators that you already have relationships with. And this is an opportunity for you to expand your pool of evaluators that you might consider going to engage and work with you. So we have an online database that is searchable, that is also free to search. You just need to create a username and password for yourself. And you can go in, and we've created it so that you can find evaluators based on different kinds of categories. It might be location, it might be work with particular populations of focus, it might be certain methodologies that you're looking for, or in a particular system like education or juvenile justice. So we currently, we just closed our last call for evaluators for this year and are in the process of reviewing the applicants that we received, and we'll be able to announce them next year. We hope to have this be an application that is year-round. Currently, it is done twice a year through a review process that includes external evaluators and part of our ETB team. And finally, around fundraising and field building work, this is the bulk of a lot of our work as well, in terms of working with foundations, identifying supporters and funders for expanding the bench to help support these free services that we provide for the field, as well as building capacity also in foundations. We've been hearing a lot more in calls with funding partners that there's interest in expanding capacity within evaluation, within philanthropy itself too. And so that is work that we're eager to explore. And we have been also, one of the activities that we've been doing that has received a lot of good feedback is coffee breaks that we've been helping to facilitate between funders and our evaluators in ACE. Given that we can't get together at AEA or in other sections right now, it's been an opportunity for people to just get to know each other and to learn about expertise and interests as well. So I'll pause there, and I do want to note that we do have Q&A available on the platform feature. So if anything is coming up for you, please feel free to send us questions throughout the session today. And I think we'll go on to the next slide, Liz, unless there was anything I missed that you want to highlight. Okay. So as we mentioned earlier, a change matrix came into this work in 2018, specifically on expanding the bench. And as we embarked on it, we wanted to consider the meaning and the definitions of words like culturally responsive and equitable evaluation. And as we reviewed the literature, there were several key concepts that were really important to us to include in this definition. So the importance of context was something we really felt was important, particularly the historical context in a community. And we also wanted to make sure that we highlighted evaluation practices that are inclusive and participatory. And most importantly, that evaluation should be used to inform improvements. So program improvement, policy change, but ultimately making sure we're using evaluation results to advance equity. So those are some of the key things that I wanted to make sure that we highlighted in this definition. We also engaged our stakeholders in this process. We have an advisory team that informs our expanding the bench work to finalize the definition that we currently use. And you can find that on our website as well.
Great, thanks. Well, we just wanted to offer you some of that feedback from a lead scholar who talked about her experience learning about Cree here in this quote, which I will just read because it speaks for itself. Without efforts to diversify the field, evaluators, sometimes unintentionally, perpetuate structural inequities by uplifting programs that conform to the needs perceived by those in power rather than the expressed community needs. Evaluators from diverse backgrounds strengthen evaluation practice, offering different lenses through which to identify successful processes and outcomes that address social problems. In turn, that contributes to equity in the social service sector. I just don't know how you can say it any better than that. And Ebony was one of our lead scholars and danced with us last week in their virtual culmination. It was pretty awesome. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our lovely panelists who have been willing to come and talk a little bit about their experience with expanding the bench. Contini Murray from the Annie E. Casey Foundation. They were in it before we were, so we thought it'd be useful to hear from Contini. And then she'll pass it to Martina, who will talk a little bit about Robert Wood Johnson's ongoing support for expanding the bench. Matthew Carr from the Walton Family Foundation can talk a little bit about why they signed up this year. They're newer funders. And Kate Cervaki from the Hartford Community Foundation for Public Giving can talk a little bit about ways in which they've contributed in non-monetary ways to our initiative. So we're gonna stop showing our screen so you can see folks, and I'd ask Contini to take it away and pass it when you're ready. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Liz. When we launched Expanding the Bench in 2014, several principles guided our plans, including a social justice imperative to increase access to opportunity for groups historically underrepresented in evaluation, and an imperative to strengthen research and data, realizing that when philanthropy and really the entire social sector include evaluators from diverse underrepresented communities, we increase the likelihood of our methods, analyses, and interpretation offering more benefit to the communities that we serve. And in the case of Casey, these are often vulnerable communities of color. Another guiding principle was that evaluation should be done in service to equity. We spoke to a number of funders in the planning phase of this work and heard over and over again what many of you know, that networking, referrals, and repeat contracts are how we in philanthropy find the evaluators we need. And while these are efficient, the practices really limit the pool of evaluators to those who are already in our networks and really disadvantages us from taking advantage of the opportunity to have more voices and more perspectives in our work. We launched Expanding the Bench to make it simple for Casey and other staff in philanthropy, think tanks, nonprofits, and other research organizations to engage more evaluators from underrepresented communities. Also, culturally responsive and equitable evaluation were integrated into the capacity building work of Expanding the Bench to advance existing efforts to embed equity-focused practices in the evaluation ecosystem. As a result of this work, Casey's grant making with people of color-led organizations and consultants, as well as principal investigators of color, has increased over time. And our work, the process and the end products have really benefited from more perspectives, more diverse perspectives, in the incorporation of more equity-focused approaches. By the third year of the initiative, we learned several lessons, and our experience suggested that LEAD in the ACE evaluation network had the potential to transform the evaluation ecosystem if given the opportunity to grow and be sustained. So we engaged in a year-long sustainability strategic planning process that most notably included identifying an existing mission-aligned organization that would offer infrastructure to manage and grow expanding the bench, as well as offer complementary strategies for success. Several expanding the bench community members, including funder advisors who were part of the work at that time, partnered with Casey in a participatory process to select this organization, which resulted in Change Matrix being selected in 2018. Insightful and innovative, committed and courageous. These are just a few words to describe the Change Matrix team's skilled leadership and collaborative work with the Expanding the Bench community and funders. This month is actually the second year anniversary of Casey transitioning management of Expanding the Bench to Change Matrix. I don't know if Liz and Rochelle, if you recall that. And I don't think that any of us could have predicted in those early transition meetings where we would be today. On one hand, with the work still advancing and growing, and at the same time, us in 2020 living through a global pandemic that has disproportionately impacted Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and other marginalized communities, or that I repeated witnessing of the tragic killing of Black people by police would incite a massive movement to root out systemic racism and policing in other areas of life. And as mentioned earlier, Expanding the Bench has a resounding relevance in this moment of acute adversity, where we're all hearing the cries, the loud cries for the social sector to act more boldly and to act with urgency. And I personally feel that urgency and a need to lean more into efforts that will advance equity in this moment. And it's certainly true and clear that now more than ever, we need strong research and data, and we need to collectively lean into approaches like Expanding the Bench that help ensure that we have the resources and tools to achieve racial justice, equity, and inclusion on a grand scale. Expanding the Bench remains a pivotal Casey investment, and we continue to support it in diverse ways that help us to meet our equitable evaluation journey goals, such as participation in the ACE Evaluation Network coffee breaks, which have been an awesome experience for myself and other colleagues at Casey that have participated. And so I am just thrilled to be part of this conversation and to share, and I look forward to your questions if you're interested in going deeper on the origins and certainly Casey's experience right now working with the Expanding the Bench community. I will now pass the mic to Martina.
Thank you, Kantini, and hello, everyone. The work of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is centered on health equity, which for us is both an outcome and a process. As a process, it requires that we take a close look at our way to do business and reflect on how what we do is aligned with our values, as well as on what can be done to ensure that our actions are a direct manifestation of these values. As part of this reflection, there's been a growing realization that the pool of evaluators that historically we have worked with has not been very diverse. And this has been a challenge for a while. Before expanding the bench, in preparation, say, for a request for a proposal, our efforts to work with somebody new meant that we would reach out to some colleagues internally and ask for a recommendation based on their experience. but still that was not a guarantee that we would find somebody new or that this new person was any more diverse than the usual suspects. So in response to our reasons for continuing to invest in expanding the bench, I will say that, first of all, this initiative gave us an opportunity to invest in a pipeline to get more evaluators from historically underrepresented backgrounds that are trained in culturally responsive and equitable evaluation methods, which in and of itself is very well aligned with our guiding principle to cultivate diversity, inclusion, and collaboration. Second, as a national funder, we don't have direct ties to specific communities, but we know that the impact of our funding spills over in communities. And in this context, being mindful of equity as a process means that we must do everything in our power to make sure that the evaluations that we oversee are valuable to the communities where they take place, and they have the potential to lead to action and concrete community-centered policy or programmatic changes in the long term. For an evaluation to be relevant and meaningful, what we have learned is that it must be respectful of and responsive to the values and unique culture and dynamics of that community. And it must be conducted through the lens of whatever issues are being experienced by that community. And these, I would say, are, in a nutshell, are the main reasons why Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has invested in expanding the bench over the past couple of years. And similarly to what Kantani just described, I believe that in the current sociopolitical and health context, it has become even more urgent to understand and lift the lived experiences of people that have been systematically disenfranchised for decades, and methods that are not culturally responsive or equitable do not necessarily allow that. And with that, I will pass the mic to Matthew Carr.
Thank you, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Really, it's been interesting because what my colleagues have shared here, it really resonates with the story that we have here at the Walton Family Foundation as well. A lot of the same reasons, and in many ways the same path that has brought us here. So for us, I joined the foundation back in January of this year. And when I came on board, we were really just sort of getting underway with a new 5-year strategic planning process for the entire foundation. So our program teams, as well as the support functions like SLED, which is Strategy, Learning, and Evaluation Department. And throughout that process, foundation-wide, there was a real focus on how can we do a better job of embedding equity across the board into all of our strategies, into all of the work that we do. And for us on the SLED team, this has really become, I would say, one of our top points of emphasis in terms of where we want to focus our time and our effort and our resources as we embark in our new 5-year strategic plan, and how we do our work moving forward is really how do we center culturally relevant and equitable evaluation practice throughout all of the work that we do to do research and evidence and evaluation. And this takes a number of forms. Part of it is looking internally at our processes, at our practices, at our products, and looking and exploring ways that we can evolve those and improve them and embed those practices there. But as others have mentioned, it's also about our partnerships. It's about who we are working with and how we're working with them, and how do we really fundamentally rethink that? Because as others have mentioned, sort of historically, the foundation has had a limited set of external partners that we've worked with, and they've traditionally, been the same folks, folks who have relationships, folks that we know well. And so, I would say as we're at this inflection point, as we're looking for ways to expand and embed culturally relevant, equitable evaluation practices in our work, it's very clear to us that includes not just how we do our work, but who we're doing our work with as well. And so part of it is making sure that we're working with a broader set of partners who also bring new approaches, new perspectives, and new voices into our work. And that, it's really important. I really appreciated the comment that this is of acute relevance at this particular point in time. And so, the reason that we joined as a supporter of expanding the bench was in part because it was of particular interest to us. How can we do a better job of expanding our own bench? And so that partnership was really helpful. But it's more than that. I think it's critical because expanding the bench is filling a critical gap in the field of helping foundations like the Walton Family Foundation to connect with others, to meet folks that we would not otherwise meet, and to have a chance to get to know potential partners that we wouldn't otherwise have a chance to if we were just continuing our previous practice, or even just trying to put more RFPs out, or just sort of, do broad communications out into the world in ways that were not quite so targeted. And so really, it's filling a critical gap for us. We think that this is important to advance practice, not just here internally, but for the field as well. And also, I think ETB is doing a lot of great work to build a community of practice. So that it's not just a benefit to funders. I think there's a real benefit here for the community of evaluators that we want to work with as well. And so, for us, it was interesting. One of our I would say one of the big pushes that we got from our leadership team here, from our board, was for SLED to be more engaged in the field and to do more. To sort of be out and be a thought partner and to be engaged. And as we thought about it, and as we talked to a lot of our peers and colleagues in other foundations, we came to realize that there was this really, I think, helpful intersection between our push to want to move forward and advance our own practice and the potential for an organization like Expanding the Bench to help us also be engaged in the field in ways that were positive and constructive and could help to build practice for others as well. And so I would just say, it's very serendipitous that we happened to have a chance to meet with Elizabeth and her team. The timing was perfect, and it checked so many boxes for us in terms of what we want to do and where we want to go. And so I would just say I really appreciate the chance to be a partner and to be here and to have a chance to be a part of what I think is some really important work. So I will stop there and I will pass it over to Kate.
Thanks, Matthew. My name is Kate Cervaki. I'm the Director of Strategic Learning and Evaluation at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. We're a community foundation in North Central Connecticut. So I'm representing a foundation that's a lot smaller than some of the other folks who are on this call. And I think Elizabeth had framed it as explaining why we're sort of an in-kind supporter of this work. And when I think about our support, or framed that way, I really think our experience has been less as a contributor or a supporter and really more as a practice partner or a learning partner in this work. And we've gotten so much out of our participation with Expanding the Bench. I think I'll largely echo my other colleagues who preceded me on the call for talking about the journey and why we've engaged with Expanding the Bench. Just very briefly, about 3 years ago, I joined the foundation at the inception of a research and evaluation unit. That was at a time at the foundation where equity really was coming to the forefront as something key to our philanthropic practice and a way to better serve and work with our community. Part of that involved a review of existing evaluations that we had commissioned over the years. It became immediately evident that these evaluations were lacking in rigor, also in terms of producing products and findings that were actually able to be used and were resonant with our community. In looking at the partners that we had worked with on those evaluations, they were largely well-known firms, the same firms, and evaluation teams that were almost completely or sometimes completely led by white evaluators and consultants. The methods that were employed in these evaluations were pretty standard. They weren't focused on the community. They certainly didn't center community, and they were not innovative in terms of methods, approaches, reporting styles, sense making, dissemination. So it became completely obvious to us that we needed to expand our network. And in thinking about how to do that, we, of course, thought about our own personal networks. That was insufficient. Reaching out to folks, doing literature scans to find evaluators who had done work was insufficient. Expanding the bench was there with this network and this goal of expanding the ecosystem and really shoring up the ecosystem. So in partnering with Expanding the Bench, we wanted to do more than just expand our own network. We wanted to make sure that we were doing our part to build a healthy ecosystem where there were evaluators who were well-resourced and well-connected and in conversation with us about our practice. It wasn't just enough to sort of check the box and be tokenistic and expanding our network and the kinds of evaluators or evaluators of particular backgrounds, but people who are really engaged and thoughtful about the practice of culturally responsive and equitable evaluation. Just to speak a little anecdotally about our involvement, we've served as a lead scholar practicum host site. This has been revelatory for us. We were able to engage with a scholar who, her name is Dr. Kim Harris. She helped us with the needs assessment of small businesses owned by people of color and women. It was a great project, very much engaged with community, very interesting methodology. It's resulted in some great findings. Part of the best aspect of it was the actual advancement of our own practice, both in terms of myself as an evaluation professional, but also our program staff that were able to interact with her and the community evaluators that worked on the project. I think Rochelle spoke briefly to the coffee breaks that have been a part of Expanding the Bench, and we've been so pleased to take part in ACE network events, and those coffee breaks have been a great way to engage with evaluators and just talk about practice and actually be very reflective about our contracting and commissioning processes. And have a notebook filled with feedback from evaluators in the field, thinking about how we can be a better partner and a better funder of evaluation. And this gets down to things, RFPs versus LOIs, how payments are processed by the foundation, nitty-gritty aspects of the work that help make our partnership with learning partners and evaluators of color actually equitable and workable for them so that we can all benefit. So that's sort of my experience with Expanding the Bench, and I can pass it back to our host for the Q&A session. Thank you so much.
That's great. Kate, thank you so much. Well, hopefully what you heard from all of these folks is long-term commitment and involvement and investment in Expanding the Bench, because it aligns with who they are as foundations and who they're striving to be, and internally and in community and in the work that they do. And so we could not be more grateful for the support of everybody that's represented here. And we want to give you all an opportunity to ask some questions of these folks. I'll start it off by just saying there was one that we attempted to answer, and we're going to ask it again just to see if you have some other things that you'd like to say. Rochelle and I were busily typing, and I have a feeling you all have some things to say about this as well. I'm really interested in the examples shared already about how philanthropies have changed their practice related to Cree. Are there other examples of these practice changes within an organization that can be shared? Just want to pitch that all to you all. Are there examples within your foundations of how practices have changed based on Cree?
I can start, and I might invite my colleague Kimberly Spring to add, because she's leading this work. But we are in the midst of establishing a youth advisory board or group that's going to work with our research, evaluation, and learning team members in helping to plan and think through different components throughout the phase of evaluations and research projects, as well as we hope over time this group may have their own ideas on research and evaluation projects that they would like to pursue their own questions. And so that's an example of how we're thinking about shifting power within our practice. And I definitely think it is an outgrowth of our equitable evaluation journey. And part of that has been our increased exposure to practitioners through LEAD and through the ACE Evaluation Network who have employed these approaches, and we've been able to learn from them. And then there are other pieces of our equitable evaluation journey as well that have contributed to our interest in having this youth advisory group. And so we're excited about it and excited about how that's going to move forward. And I don't know, Kimberly, is there anything that you want to add about that?
So I think you did a nice job of capturing what we're looking to do and what is motivating us. I'd like to make sure that other people also have time to offer. So, but happy to also answer questions if folks want to learn more about this work.
Thanks, Kimberly and Kantini. Others?
I can share for a second, maybe. What I've noticed is that some evaluation teams that we have worked with in the past or that we were working with at that time made a deliberate effort in adding a member to the team where this member had a specific expertise in culturally responsive and equitable evaluation. So it was nice to see that where the team itself did not have that expertise, they did understand the importance of having that kind of background and lens to bring to the evaluation, and we're able to find somebody that added that value to their team. And I've seen that happening more and more, so I'm hopeful that it will become common practice among evaluators.
That's great, Martina, and that actually goes to another question back there when they were asking about ACE evaluation members being individuals. And while membership is based on individual status, they also bring their firms with them, and they are available to partner with bigger firms who, as you said, are building their teams and expanding their capacity. And they do that with the ACE evaluation members. So that was a nice way. Martina, thank you for opening the door for me to answer another question that was already up there. But we can stay with this one about how practices have shifted, because I think someone else was about to answer it before I slipped in there.
I think it might be worth noting some very on-the-ground things that we've learned from partnering with evaluators that we've found through the ACE network or the LEAD Scholar program. Some of the things that have really shifted our thinking is the soup to nuts aspect of practicing Cree. So really having community involvement when it comes to creating RFPs or LOIs or just the definition of the project, holding off until we have an evaluator on board to unpack what the real evaluation questions are, and then thinking all the way through to dissemination and sense making and really what will work for our community and will work beyond the walls of the foundation. A big takeaway that I think has been instructive for the entire foundation and is really helping us dismantle some of the whiteness that shows up in philanthropy is the speed at which evaluations take place. The sense of urgency in getting things done and having very specific milestones that frankly don't work with our nonprofits, our agencies, folks that we work with, beneficiaries, leaders in our community, that we're imposing a timeline that is much too quick, that's much too short, and that doesn't send our community throughout the project. That's been a huge piece of feedback that we've gotten from working with the evaluators that we've partnered with in the last year and a half or so. And it's been just instructive, not only to our evaluation, but to our overall grant making and practice of partnership with folks in our community.
Oh, that's great, Kate. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to dive into this question? And please, for those of you who are also on the webinar, feel free to continue to ask questions in the Q&A box at the very bottom of your screen. You don't get opportunities like this to pick these kinds of brains, so we just invite you to take it and ask away.
I'm happy to jump in quickly as somebody who's still perhaps at a bit of an earlier stage in our learning process. Just two things that come to mind very quickly. One is just to make the pitch for the coffee breaks, the coffee meetings. Those have been really, really helpful. Just to get to know new people, to expand, the set of folks that we just know and we're talking to and are having conversations with and are looking for opportunities where we can partner. And the other is, we've worked a little bit with an organization called We All Count, and Heather Krause and her team there, just to get to know more about. They have a data equity framework that we found really helpful and really useful, just as a way to begin to pressure test our practices internally. And as I mentioned, across the board, from how we even think about when to do a project and like what the questions are and who we're asking and who we're getting input from on the questions to make sure we're asking the right questions and asking them in the right way, all the way through, research design, data collection, reporting. Because, one of the things that's been really helpful for me is breaking our work down into some of those really concrete pieces, and then beginning to have some really great conversations and learning about how we can do, at each step, we can do our work differently to do it better. So there's just two things that came to mind quickly.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Matthew. It's a wonderful addition. And one of the things that I found, Carla and we did 87 calls this year, up from 50 some last year. We spend a lot of time talking on the phone with folks just like you, because we want to understand what you're looking for, what you're hoping for, what you have questions about. And we, of course, want to increase the use of the ACE database and the support for expanding the bench. And we found, Matthew, something similar to what you just said, which is that people are at all different phases of their journey. They're in different places. And so these conversations are an opportunity to find out, where are you? What would be useful? How can we nudge you towards the ACE database? And then Carla sends this very great email at the end saying, here are 85 resources that you can use in your equity journey. And so it's important that we are honest about where we are, and we're working hard to get where we can. And expanding the bench can absolutely be an important part, an integral part of that journey. Let's see. There was another question, which maybe I'll ask Rochelle to respond to, because it was about our ACE network and the membership in that ACE network.
Sure, thanks, Liz. So we did get a question from our participant about interest in additional detail about our ACE evaluator members and how they represent different communities or different domains, and membership and representation across the field. And so we do have a profile that we've created in the past of our ACE evaluators, and we're happy to send an updated one out as a follow-up as well, after we welcome in our next set here in December. And so we will be working on that soon. And in terms of your question about to what extent have participating foundations been able to successfully draw from this pool, that is a great question, and one that we're always trying to track and is a little hard at times, because we often rely on people to respond to our annual survey. We have a survey of our ACE Evaluation Network members, as well as an annual survey of our funders. And we do rely on folks to let us know, like, what happened with your outreach? Were you able to have a conversation? Did you end up contracting with an evaluator? And so if you have, we'd love to hear from you, because sometimes it's mostly anecdotal, and then other times we are leaning on that annual survey to find out. And so I'd have to go back and look at our numbers from last year, and we are collecting that annual survey right now, actually. So if you've seen one in your inbox, please let us know.
And Rochelle, if I could just piggyback on that real quick, we've heard some things from these 87 calls that we did this year about what you're looking for. So you're looking for things like, do you evaluate programs? Do you evaluate strategy? Do you evaluate policy? how do we know that you've done more than one evaluation in one of those? And so we take feedback like that, and we are always thinking about how to make refinements to the ACE evaluation database so that you can find what you're looking for. We've also heard we're looking for environmental, education, health and human services, and social justice. Make sure that all of those things are in one person. Just kidding. So what we're trying to do is make sure that there's adequate representation in all of those domains so that people can find what they're looking for. Interestingly, we've had a couple people in 2020 say, yeah, you know, we used to only want evaluators in Texas, but that doesn't seem as important as it used to. So familiarity with community is important. Being in the local community, not quite as important when we're all a little more comfortable with Zoom. So things evolve, and we know that, and we're trying to keep up with those evolution.
One practice I just want to add, Liz, that that some of the philanthropy partners have engaged in with us, which has been really nice, is that sometimes some philanthropy announcements are able to be just for ACE Evaluation Network members. And so we've had some foundations share announcements with us that we share privately with our evaluators, which helps to show value of the network. And so we welcome that and can help facilitate that. Sometimes some foundations also will share an announcement with us a little earlier than they will to the general announcement, so as to give time for ACE evaluators to maybe reach out and partner, recognizing that sometimes the scope of the work will not fit with one person or one firm. And so it gives time for some partnership conversations to occur.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Rochelle. And you took us to 1 minute before the hour, which is perfect. So yes. I'm going to pass it to you to put that slide back up of all the many ways that people can contact us, because we do want to be responsive to you. I want to personally thank our co-hosts and our panelists, and kick it to Rochelle to carry us out.
Yes, so thank you for our panelists. I think you gave us such a nice picture all the way from the beginning of the effort, Kentini. Thank you to some of our current and newer funders who have been so generously for supporting Expanding the Bench. We've heard that creating community is crucial, that challenging our existing structures and practices is important, especially during this time. And so we invite you to think of us at Expanding the Bench as part of your processes too, and we're always eager to have conversation or to connect you with other of your peers who might help provide you some insight as well. In addition to our emails, please do visit our expandingthebench.org website, where you'll also find a lot of rich information, we hope. So thank you for joining us on this Monday. Thank you to our panelists, and feel free to follow up with any questions that you might have for us. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.